public never knew the full measure of what she had overcome in order to become the great singer, the great icon that she became.
It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
They tell me that my father was a guitar player, but I don't know because I never met him.
Ella Fitzgerald, a.k.a. the First Lady of Jazz and Lady Ella, was a total legend in the American jazz scene. We're talking about the queen of the great American songbook here. So, Ella had a pretty rough start in life, but she found her calling in singing. She made her big debut at the Apollo Theater back in 1934, thanks to an amateur contest that discovered her epic talent. From then on, she ruled the jazz world for decades. In 1958, Ella made major history by becoming the first African-American woman to snag a Grammy. And it wasn't a one-time thing. Her voice, with its perfect pitch and huge range, earned her 13 Grammys over her career. Oh, and she sold over 40 million albums. Her multi-volume songbooks with Verve Records, they're absolute American classics. Let's get into the life of the First Lady of Jazz early life. Ella Fitzgerald was born on April 25, 1917, in Newport News, Virginia. Her dad, William Ashland Fitzgerald, was a transfer wagon driver, and her mom, Temperance Tempe Henry, both labeled as mulatto. Her parents weren't married, but they lived together in Newport News for a couple of years after she was born. In the early 1920s, Ella's mom got together with a Portuguese immigrant named Joseph da Silva, and they moved to Yonkers, New York. Ella got a half-sister, Frances da Silva, in 1923. By 1925, the whole family settled in a poor Italian neighborhood on School Street. Ella started school at 6 and totally K-eded in the classroom, bouncing through several schools before hitting up Benjamin Franklin Junior High in 1929. Ella and her family were super into their Methodist faith, active at the Bethany African Methodist Episcopal Church. She hit up worship services, Bible study, and Sunday school there. This church is where Ella got her first taste of music. By 3rd grade, Ella was obsessed with dancing and was a huge fan of Earl Snakehips Tucker. She'd bust out dance moves for her friends on the way to school and during lunchtime. Ella also had a thing for jazz. She jammed to records by Louis Armstrong, Bing Crosby, and the Boswell sisters. She was especially obsessed with Connie Boswell from the Boswell sisters, saying, "My mom brought home one of her records, and I fell in love with it. I tried so hard to sound just like her."
My mother had a very beautiful classical voice. They tell me that my father was a guitar player, but I don't know because I never met him.
In 1932, when Ella was just 15, her mom tragically passed away from a car accident. Her stepdad took over for a while, but by April 1933, she was off to Harlem to live with her aunt. There are whispers, according to biographer Stuart Nicholson, that her stepdad might have mistreated her, leading to her quick move. Ella started skipping school, and her grades tanked. She ended up working as a lookout at a bordello and with a mafia-connected numbers runner. This rough patch in her life, she never talked about it publicly. Eventually, the authorities caught up with her, and she was sent to the Colored Orphan Asylum in the Bronx. When it got too crowded there, she was moved to the New York Training School for Girls, a state reformatory in Hudson, New York. Personal life.
Oh, Pops, put that horn down and listen. I want to ask you a question.
What's bugging you, baby?
Well, have you ever been in love?
Ella Fitzgerald's love life was pretty eventful. She tied the knot at least twice, and there might have been a secret third marriage in there, too. Her first marriage was in 1941 to Benny Cornegay, a convicted drug dealer and local dock worker. That marriage didn't last long. It was annulled in 1942. Her second marriage was a bit more high profile. In December 1947, she married Ray Brown, the famous bass player she met while touring with Dizzy Gillespie's band. They adopted a child from Ella's half-sister, Frances, and named him Ray Brown Jr. But with both of them constantly on the road and recording, little Ray was mostly raised by Ella's aunt, Virginia. The couple divorced in 1953, thanks to their hectic careers, but they still performed together. Then there's the juicy tidbit from July 1957. Reuters reported that Ella secretly married a young Norwegian named Thor Einar Larsen in Oslo. She even furnished an apartment there. But the romance fizzled out fast when Larsen got sentenced to 5 months hard labor in Sweden for stealing money from a woman he was previously engaged to. Ella Fitzgerald was famously shy. Trumpet player Mario Bauza, who played with her in her early days with Chick Webb, said she wasn't much of a social butterfly. She didn't hang out much. When she joined the band, she was all about the music. She was a lonely girl in New York, just focused on the gig. Later, when she got an award named after her by the Society of Singers, Ella said, "I don't want to say the wrong thing, which I always do, but I think I do better when I sing." From 1949 to 1956, Ella lived in the St. Albans neighborhood of Queens, New York. This was a swanky area for successful African Americans, and her neighbors included jazz greats like Illinois Jacquet, Count Basie, and Lena Horne. Ella wasn't just a music icon, she was also a civil rights activist. She received the NAACP Equal Justice Award and the American Black Achievement Award. In 1949, she joined Norman Grantz's Jazz at the Philharmonic Tour, which aimed to break down racial barriers. Granz made sure promoters eliminated segregated seating and ensured equal pay and accommodations for Ella, regardless of her S and race. If they didn't comply, the shows were canceled. Talk about using your platform for good.
It makes you feel so bad to think that we can't go down to certain parts of the South and give a concert like we do overseas and have everybody just come to hear the music, enjoy the music.
Bill Reed, the author of Hot from Harlem, 12 African American Entertainers, called Ella Fitzgerald the Civil Rights Crusader because she faced discrimination throughout her career. In 1954, she couldn't board a Pan-American flight to Australia because of racial discrimination. Despite all the obstacles and racial barriers, Ella was a total boss. She was recognized as a cultural ambassador and received the National Medal of Arts in 1987 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is America's highest non-military honor. In 1993, Ella started the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation. This foundation focused on 4 major areas: academic opportunities for kids, music education, basic care for those in need, and medical research on diabetes, heart disease, and vision impairment. She wanted to give back and help those at risk and less fortunate. She also supported several nonprofits like the American Heart Association, City of Hope, and the Retina Foundation. Ella was not just a musical legend, she was a real-life hero. In her later years, Ella Fitzgerald battled diabetes, which caused all kinds of complications. In 1985, she was briefly hospitalized for respiratory issues. Then again in 1986 for congestive heart failure, and in 1990 for exhaustion. Despite all this, she was still performing. In March 1990, she wowed the crowd at the Royal Albert Hall in London with the Count Basie Orchestra for the launch of Jazz FM, and even rocked a gala dinner at the Grosvenor House Hotel. But things got really tough in 1993 when she had to have both legs amputated below the knee due to diabetes. Her eyesight was also affected.
I was known as one of the great little tap dancers, but I've always been sort of a shy person.
Ella Fitzgerald passed away at her home from a stroke on June 15, 1996, at the age of 79. Just a few hours after her death, the Playboy Jazz Festival kicked off at the Hollywood Bowl, and they honored her with a marquee that read, "Ella, we will miss you." Her funeral was a private affair, and she was laid to rest at Inglewood Park Cemetery in Inglewood, California. The jazz world lost a legend, but her music lives on forever.
Doing an impression of Louis Armstrong was one of her party tricks, and she could do it from a really early age.
Career Ella Fitzgerald's epic career spanned over 5 decades and left a permanent mark on music. Here are some of her greatest hits. 17, Ella made her debut at the Apollo Theater during Amateur Night. Her performance of A Tisket, A Tasket shot her to national fame. She found her groove with the Chick Webb Orchestra, performing at the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem. Her manager, Mo Gale, had her back until she switched to Norman Granz. In 1942, Ella left the band and went solo. With Verve Records, she recorded iconic versions of the Great American Songbook. Ella teamed up with legends like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and the Ink Spots, creating timeless tracks like Dream a Little Dream of Me and Cheek to Cheek. She snagged 14 Grammy Awards, the National Medal of Arts, the NAACP's inaugural President's Award, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Ella's legacy is pure gold. Ella Fitzgerald's life was no smooth ride, but dang, did she make it look effortless on stage? From a tough start in Virginia to losing her mom tragically at a young age, Ella faced hardships that would knock anyone down. But instead of letting it dim her light, she turned to music as her lifeline. Imagine being a teenage girl shuffled between schools, then ending up in an orphanage because life threw you a curveball. Ella didn't just survive, she thrived. She hustled through gigs in Harlem, worked odd jobs, and even dealt with some shady characters just to make ends meet. And that's not even touching on the racial discrimination she faced throughout her career. But through it all, Ella found solace and strength in her voice. She sang her heart out, breaking records and glass ceilings in the jazz world. Her resilience and talent earned her not just fame, but also respect as a civil rights crusader. She used her platform to fight discrimination and promote equality, showing the world that music isn't just entertainment, it's a force for change. So when you hear Ella's soulful melodies, remember the incredible woman behind the music. Her life wasn't easy, but she turned every hardship into a song that still resonates today. Ella Fitzgerald wasn't just a jazz legend. She was a beacon of hope and perseverance, reminding us all to keep swinging no matter what life throws our way.